journalist.
But Drew Hernandez is a strong-minded individual.
Exposing lawlessness.
Drew Hernandez, who is ideological.
Finding the truth.
And use the word Antifa.
This is what they do.
Battling
They're
mainstream
liars. The woke mob, all they can do is lie.
These are the front lines.
What's going on, thought criminals? Welcome to Frontlines. I am your host, Drew Hernandez. There's a lot going on, right? Elon Musk is making, obviously, world news all over the place, but there are a lot of divided opinions. Not obviously, the left hates him because he's opened up the door for a lot of right-wingers and conservatives and what they call hateful voices back onto the platform. But at the same time, he's still making statements saying freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of reach. So freedom of speech advocates are kind of like, huh? Is this guy really for freedom of speech? So to talk about it, the great Anomaly YouTuber, music artist, and overall just social media phenomenon. The guy has a huge reach, and he's an awesome commentator. I love getting his takes on things. He's going to be talking about it with me. And also, Libby Emmons, editor-in-chief of the Post Millennial, will be here later in the show to discuss the corrupt CBS News. All of a sudden, they care about Hunter Biden's laptop, woke journalists, and apparently there's a new gender-affirming care surgery, so we're going to talk about that as well. But before we begin, a reminder, America First is having a huge Black Friday deal. $20 off for general admission and 50% off VIP. Go to amfest.com for this special deal. My name is Drew Hernandez, and you are now on the front lines. Well, let's just get straight into this. Anomaly, brother, thank you for joining me again. It's always an honor to have you on the show. How you doing? How's California? Is it hot? Is it cool? Is it still commie? Thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good. It's winter's a good time. It's not too hot, not too cold. It's time, except for daylight savings time. I believe that it's a psyop to make me more tired early. So if I were president, I'd make it the sun go down at like 8 p.m. because like 5 p.m. it's not cool.
Freaking, dude, I hate this time change stuff, dude. It, like, especially when you're doing shows and and you got to like book guests and you forget. It's like, oh, we got to wait an hour to get this show. Anyways, yeah, I agree with you. But let's talk about Elon, dude, because I've been seeing you react. Everyone's reacting to Elon Musk. But I like bringing people on the show that just aren't afraid to say what they really feel. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you specifically about this. Elon is this polarized figure. I'm grateful for what he's doing, bringing people back onto the platform. Not everybody, and obviously everyone on the right is worshiping him because, he brought Trump back. And the left is hating him, and I think their authoritarianism is clearly showing. But he's still making statements saying freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of reach. What's your take on that? And we'll get into Alex Jones and all that as well. But first, let's address this freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of reach. What's your take on that, bro? Is he serious? What's going on?
Yeah, I think he's not who people want him to be. I don't think he's the free speech advocate he claimed to be, but I do think he's a net positive. He's already brought back dozens of accounts. I know Savannah Hernandez got brought back.
Yep.
A bunch of people. So I think he's a balance between he's not quite the right-wing, free speech patriot that people want him to be, but he's not as bad as some of the other tech CEOs. And even his take on Alex Jones was a little interesting because he said, I don't want to allow anybody on my platform who would exploit the death of children for a political agenda. If that's the case, you got to ban every member of Congress, all media, left-wing and right-wing media, but especially left-wing media too.
The Taliban.
That's what people,
the Taliban.
Yeah, that's what people do. Right. I mean, well, they're fine because, they have freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. If they say something, negative, he might cut out their reach and shadow ban them. But yeah, a lot of people, that's what they do in politics is they take a tragedy and they exploit that to try to take away your First Amendment, your Second Amendment. So I think he's somewhere in the middle. I think he's going to do a good job as a CEO. I think he's better. He's providing a lot of competition. But this is the thing with Elon. Whenever I compliment him, people freak out at me and say, oh, what, you want a computer chip in my brain? You're with his agenda. And I'm like, listen, he's funny. He's a troll. He's better than, I think, Zuckerberg and whoever it is at YouTube. But he's not my hero. He's definitely not conservative, I think, politically, although he will vote Republican. I think he's a balance between what the two sides hate about him. I think he's really somewhere in the middle. Better, but not perfect on free speech by any means.
Well, what's interesting as well is when it comes to free speech, I guess I just have an issue with a billionaire starting to redefine what that means in the age of technology and the digital public town square. And I think at the same time, it's just kind of like, who gets to decide that? You know, like who gets to decide what a negative tweet is and therefore it gets deboosted? Just the tweet, right? Just the tweet, not the whole account, they're saying.
Right.
But I mean, what, how do you react to that when you see a billionaire come in and start to dictate what freedom of speech actually means, especially in the eyes of Americans?
I think COVID world really exposed what would be considered hate speech and misinformation. I mean, anything against big pharma, against lockdowns, against forced masking, that was misinformation. It was dangerous. So we've already had this massive experiment of what it would look like with government and big tech overreach. So I don't think anybody, whether it's Elon Musk or Twitter, they're going to make the right decisions. You see, even with the Kanye West thing, and the Kyrie Irving thing, this is bringing on the whole new, well, is that hate speech because it's anti-Semitism? Is this hate speech because it goes against big pharma? And although there are hateful people out there and there is rhetoric that could be better, I think it's clear that when people try to police hate speech based on emotions or political bias or racial bias, it usually ends bad. And I think, like you were talking about, freedom of speech versus freedom of reach, I find, say, a Don Lemon tweet egregious. And I think every time there's a school shooting, left-wingers politicize it to try to take away the rights of innocent people. But I wouldn't get rid of their reach if it reached a lot of people. So it usually backfires against us. But I did see, Elon Musk retweet or respond to Dinesh D'Souza, who said, really what this means is conservatives get their speech taken away. And he agreed. So I think although he's not perfect, and I'm interested to see where it goes, it's pretty shocking to have a CEO, billionaire, tech guy admitting that almost all censorship to this point has been against conservatives when it comes to hate speech. So the fact that he even admits that seems to be a step forward. But people like you and everyone else, if you're skeptical and you don't like what he's doing, I think that's the key. It's called, backlash, communication, and standing up for yourself. So I don't think we should worship anybody.
Exactly. There's the key word, worship. My thing is more, I'm tired of when we see one person say one thing that we agree with and everyone just falls on their knees and starts worshiping that. Like that's sus, and that can be dangerous. While at the same time, my main thing is accountability, right? Like we have to hold people accountable. And it seems like, I'm just going to be honest, people on the right, when you call someone out for their crap
right,
and you hold them accountable, you get canceled by people from the right. And these are the same people that come out and say, oh, well, cancel culture this, cancel culture that, because you decided to hold someone accountable. That's the crap
right,
that I don't like right now that's taking place. And all I want is to hold someone like Elon Musk essentially accountable. And I do have a question. This is just, I guess, I'll put my tinfoil hat on, just to talk about Alex. Is it possible that he sees Alex Jones as a threat, the most polarized, vocal individual against the New World Order and transhumanism that kind of wants to push something like Neuralink in the future that will require like a financial backing and the masses to kind of get on board with it? Could Alex Jones become a financial problem for that in the future for Elon Musk? Is that maybe a reason why?
That's interesting. I mean, if anybody's going to oppose the transhumanism of the Neuralink, it's going to be Alex. I think that's it.
On Twitter.
Also, right. I think he's he's the number one kind of enemy in the media. He's getting sued. He's on the precipice of free speech. So as many problems as Elon has, I think bringing him back would cause more. And I guess Elon kind of just picks and chooses his battles. But I called him out and I got thousands of likes, which, it's not like, oh, I'm so special, but it's nice to see a good ratio on Elon, like you said, holding him accountable, because his logic is flawed there and it's based on emotion. I agree. If your rule is you can't politicize the death of children, then also left-wingers can't do it, because as soon as there's a shooting at a nightclub or anything, we don't even know who the shooter was. Maybe the shooter was gay themselves and they were mad at their gay friends. I don't know. I'm waiting a week to see what it is. But the second something happens, whether it's a school shooting or a shooting at a nightclub, you have Democrat politicians flocking to push their political agenda. So, if Elon's true logic is you shouldn't be able to exploit death and children's deaths for political narrative, then he needs to enforce that on Democrats too. And I think it's our job to say that and hold them accountable versus just kind of like licking the boots. And I think liberals win because when they don't win office, they still push culture in their direction. And I think for some reason, as like tough as conservatives pretend to be, I think they're very nice and kind-hearted and almost like naive and foolish in a way. So when the Overton window starts moving right, you actually have a lot of conservatives crying about it and crying hate speech or like, oh, this is good enough. And it's like, it's definitely an improvement. Like I said, I think Elon's doing a good job, but it's like Trump. These are two very transparent people. So you might as well take advantage of it. It's not bad to question Trump or Elon. It's like you might actually get what you're looking for with them versus with Chuck Schumer or Zuckerberg. They're never going to listen to. So you might as well take advantage of the fact that they're actually doing customer service in real time versus just sitting back and assuming that they have
shadow banning and deleting all your followers in real time. I guess like I always say, my number one concern, I also thought about this too, and we got about 2 minutes left, and I wanted your take, is I really wonder what his definition of the left is. Because if you're pro-free speech, because I think he did tweet or he said something, when the left is mad at you and when the right is mad at you, you're doing something right. But my only question is, what's your definition of the left? Because if you are on the pro-censorship side of things, the far left, the totalitarians, how could you possibly be running around saying that you're pro-free speech and that there needs to be public dialogue taking place in the new digital town square? I guess my question is, what is his definition of the left and what is being in the middle? Because to me, dealing with the Antifas, and you know this is why they call, you far right and Tim Pool far right when you're actually like trying to be as center as possible, but because you're not far left enough, you're too far right. So I guess what is his definition? I know you can't answer that, but what do you think about that?
Just based on his tweets, I'm guessing he thinks the far left is just people that have gone so far away from reality that if you are a moderate liberal, they freak out at you. He sees that, I think, from the bigger perspective in the corporate world. I think his ex was like to the point where everything's bigoted. So he probably defines it like that. But with free speech, I think this is a national conversation that we need to have in general, because whether it's racism, sexism, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, climate denial, conspiracy theory, anti-vaxxer, all these words that have been created to be like, you're crazy, we're right. We have to have a conversation about what is free speech and what is hate speech, because if people hate the truth or they hate criticism of their political party, they would perceive the truth as hate speech. And, when it comes to race, etc., there's a lot of racial groups that are identifying as race, grouping as their race. They're doing activism on behalf of their race. But the second you criticize them, then all of a sudden it's racist and racists don't exist. And it's like, I don't care what race you are, but if your whole group is based on that, I think it's spurring a national conversation on what is free speech and what is hate speech. And I think a lot of people on both sides don't want to admit that, the truth sounds like hate speech to people who hate the truth. So any complex social or racial issues need to be discussed on a free market and people can have an opinion about it. But this lopsided kind of hypocrisy of you can say this, but you can't say this. And also talking about tragedies, questioning historical events. Without this, it's very dangerous. So I think true free speech is people having unpopular discussions about things that people don't want to have. So I don't think very many people support free speech on either party.
That's how we got here. That's literally how we got here. And I think if you really are for free speech, you got to deal with a lot of stuff that you don't want to hear, period. Brother, thank you for the takes. Where can people follow you and see all your great content and all your great work?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's DreamRare, DreamRare. And if you want to find all my channels, I have Facebook, YouTube, BitChute, Rumble. I just got deleted on TikTok, so I guess I don't have TikTok anymore. Oh, well, I guess the communist Chinese regime have decided that my speech is hate speech. So, of course. Yeah, DreamRareLinks.com. If you just go to DreamRareLinks.com, it's got all my stuff. I appreciate you, Drew.
There you go. Thanks for joining me, brother.
Yep, thanks.
Joining me now is post-millennial editor-in-chief, superstar, superwoman, Wonder Woman herself, Libby Emmons. Thank you for joining me, dude. It's always great having you on the front lines.
True.
Let's just get straight.
That's quite the intro.
Let's just get straight into this. CBS is finally admitting Hunter Biden's laptop is real. More than 2 years after the fact. 2 years. Yeah. I wanted your take. What is going on here? Obviously, we're like, oh, look, they're stupid. They're totally far behind, but there's got to be more to this.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. And the little report that they did, we brought in experts and they were forensic experts and they examined and they listened to the voicemails. We're very serious now that this is real. 2 years after the New York Post, Emma Jo Morris broke this story, CBS is finally catching up and there has to be a reason for it. Right at the beginning, when this came out in the lead up to the 2020 election, the New York Post, as I said, reporting on this, and you had NPR and the New York Times and the Washington Post all explaining to readers why they would not report on the story, and eventually having to walk that back. Jack Dorsey at Twitter having to literally apologize to Congress for having interfered so egregiously in the election by suppressing information about a Democratic presidential candidate. Truly amazing. So perhaps what's going on now is CBS, who also notoriously said just a few days ago that they were leaving Twitter forever, and then came back on the platform like you do when you're an idiot. Now they're doing this. They're reporting on it. There must be something in the water. They must smell the sharks circling around the White House. And perhaps there's some indication from the propagandist loyalists to the Biden regime that there could be a shakeup over there. The man did just turn 80 years old. He doesn't always look so great when he's on TV. Sometimes he just wanders around aimlessly, shaking hands with no one. He knows more about ice cream flavors than what's going on, internationally. And perhaps that's what's up.
The way you're, and you know this, being in media, the way that you're presented matters. The way that you're seen, the way that you're heard, your whole perception matters to the public. And I mean, I think we saw with former President Obama, beloved Obama, no one could say anything bad about him. He just is like this glory. It's like Jesus himself, the way that they treated him even now, even when I confronted him in Arizona, they spun it immediately. Like they could not Obama look bad. So, I mean, when you think about President Biden, it's almost kind of the same thing, but they've done it differently where they just make him look like this frail old man that could do no wrong, and he can barely get up the stairs to his plane, and you shouldn't make fun of him. He can't even eat ice creams. So it is interesting, to go to your point, that they're throwing him overboard. There's got to be a reason.
Yeah, they do seem to be throwing him overboard. Maybe they know something about the Democratic establishment that we don't know. We do know from polling, such as it is, polling has been a disaster. Even pollsters are just like, we don't really know. We're calling people. No one wants to talk to us. Who knows? But we do know from some of that polling, perhaps we know it, that people are looking for a shakeup. We've seen reports that no one really wants Biden for a second term. We've seen reports that people aren't as interested in Trump for a second term. So perhaps the old Obama adage that we want change now is what's coming up. Even though, do you notice when they say that we want change, no one can tell you what they want to change or what they want to change it into?
Yeah, I think it's clear. And then when you tie the World Economic Forum into it and they say we want to socially change everything and re-engineer everything, the change is coming, and the border is wide open, and they're trying to normalize pedophilia. And if you dare try to expose that, I mean, here we go. We got this story, Post-Millennial. I wanted your comment on this. NBC journalist claims reporting on the sexualization of children is anti-LGBTQ. Libby.
Yeah. So this is quite a fascinating turnabout, right? We had the gay rights movement in the 80s and 90s. Always under fire by normies saying, gay people are just into having sex with kids. And the whole gay rights movement was like, dudes, no, we're just gay. It's not that big deal. We're really not trying to get with your children. So, get your thing together. That's not what we're about. And that was successful. And we had the implementation of gay marriage and, a lot more respect for homosexuality in culture at large, people not getting fired for being gay, and all of that stuff, which I think is very positive, and worthwhile, human rights, et cetera, et cetera. But now we're seeing this thing where as soon as you start saying kids don't need to be taken to live shows with sexual content, you have people saying that you're anti-LGBT. You have the entire left equating sexualizing children with the gay rights movement. Why are they doing that? it totally undermines the entire history of the gay rights movement, which was about, normalizing these people who happen to have a different sexual orientation and saying, hey, we still have families, we still have jobs, we mow our lawns on the weekend, we're pretty much normal. And now we have this total reversal. I think it's a mistake. I hope that it backfires. I think that it will. And I also think that it's offensive to, gay people. We see that with Gays Against Groomers. They're like, no, we're not here to prey on your kids. We don't want to do that. We're not into it. We'd like it to stop. And the other thing too that you have with Brandy Zadrozny, who wrote the little tweet and works at NBC, is you have them saying that you have them targeting anybody who reports on the drag queen story hours or the sexual content for minors in schools, or teachers saying that kids can perhaps be born in the wrong bodies and are actually meant to be the opposite sex. You have the left saying that anyone who reports on that is hateful. And what they're trying to do is make it so that anyone who expresses questions, concerns about these things is hateful. And that way, what they can do is make sure that these ideas aren't discussed, make sure that they can continue the slow implementation of this, sexually explicit lifestyles and conversations and gender identity ideology in schools without anyone batting an eye, because everyone will be afraid to say anything. Because as soon as you say something, you are, racist, transphobic, bigoted.
The whole list goes on. The part from
they could come up with.
Just from like a moral perspective and a spiritual perspective, I mean, we're in a place, on a societal level where these people don't want law and order. They don't want any form of morality. They're more for teaching kindergarteners about anal sex rather than just, telling them one of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not kill. That we are in a place of society where it's totally depraved. And in my personal biblical opinion, there's no pulling this back. This is where this goes. It gets worse, it gets deeper, and it's only going to get even more dangerous. And what's interesting as well, what I don't understand is the gay community will say, this should be for kids. Kids should have, the liberty to do what they want, this and that. But they oppose laws that are meant to protect a child, right? Even in Florida. Mm-hmm. So let's just say you have a kid that's identifying as gay. Shouldn't you want to protect that little kid from a potential pedophile in the K through 12 system rather than just cater to the larger voices and just leave them open games for some kind of sick pedo freak to take advantage of a kid because you're turning around saying, no, just it's this, it's that. You shouldn't say anything about it at all. It's hate. It's hate. That's what doesn't make sense to me. Yeah. It just further proves to me that they hate children.
The other thing, too, that we've seen in the past year or so is we've seen so many reports of teachers who are getting involved in their students in really unpleasant ways. Project Veritas, who was recently welcomed back on Twitter, which was cool, did some reporting on what's going on in Connecticut. There was this 7th grade teacher who believed that his female students were intentionally spreading their legs to show him their underwear and that they were intentionally trying to lead him on and distract him from teaching. This is a grown man, and he thinks that that's what's going on. And he's saying it to some random stranger, Project Veritas investigative reporter, and he believes this about his students. He shouldn't be looking between their legs. I mean, that's not what should be happening in a 7th grade English classroom. So we've seen that as well. I do wonder, though, perhaps I'm just an optimist, but I do think that perhaps society can come back around. We've seen society make reversals in the past. We had the revival movement where people did come back to religion and morality. And it's also true, I think, that as you were saying, these people do think that they stand on a moral high ground. But really all they have is decades of telling everyone that they're standing on a moral high ground without actually any values supporting that. They stand on these shifting sands of progressive ideologies that are entirely contradictory to one another. And now we have journalists who are opposed to free speech. They're opposed to the free press. They're opposed to journalism. They are, in essence, anti-liberal, parading as liberal viewpoint, as having liberal viewpoints,
Agreed.
and they don't have them.
It's just crazy, Libby. You know, I know you're a mother, and it's just sometimes I sit here, I'm reporting on this stuff every single day, and it just I'm like, we're really talking about this, man. Like we're really talking about, you know, the innocence of children being violated, and we have these sickos in the media that are trying to oppose that, and they're defending predators targeting children, whether gay, straight, trans, it doesn't matter. Just stay the hell away from kids. That's where I stand, right? All right, so Libby, where can people follow you? Everyone, I mean, if you're watching Frontlines and you don't know Post Millennial, you're probably not watching Frontlines, but I know you guys are. Where can people follow you, see all your guys' great news that you're dropping on a daily, on an hourly basis, and your personal Twitter as well?
You can find us at thepostmillennial.com, and you can, of course, find me on Twitter at Libby Emmons.
Well, there you have it. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Drew.
All righty, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, I'll say this for the holidays, Thanksgiving. I know a lot of people are going to be having conversations, some heated conversations. What I expect of you is to defend the innocence of children. You're a viewer of mine. I don't care where you stand. I expect you to defend the innocence of children, protect your children, be there for your children, because that is what God expects of us on a daily, on an hourly, on a minute basis, because he's entrusted us to protect them. My name is Drew Hernandez. These are the Frontlines. I'll see you guys on the next one.
We must play offense. Game on.
You expect the rest of the world to live in La La Land. We're not.
We've been saying these things from day one.
Our solemn vow to you, be good, be brief, be gone.
You might find yourself changing your opinion on things you've never even thought twice about. That really sets America apart.
You are not ready for season 2. This is Reloaded.
My life, tale, and my truth has been to fight socialism.
Are you familiar with structural racism?
Yeah, it's a myth.